Hello and welcome to South Carolina Farm Bureau's installment of Voices of Agriculture. I'm your host, Reggie Hall. Coming up, our regular cooking and recipe segment, as well as our favorite Palmetto portraits. And then we'll have a story on camp meetings, born out of the early 17th and 18th centuries. Today we're at the Indian Field Campground in South Carolina's Low Country.
There's nothing fresher, nothing finer than locally grown fruits and vegetables. They're tastier, sweeter, healthier, and most of us would agree they're better. That's why your South Carolina Department of Agriculture is working to make certified South Carolina grown produce and products available in stores in your neighborhood. Ask for South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Welcome back. As South Carolina Farm Bureau's installment of Voices of Agriculture continues, we want to take you to an event that began in the early 1700s around the Carolinas and Georgia. It's an event simply known as Camp Meeting, and it began around the Second Great Awakening, a spiritual and turned into somewhat social event, where families of often sparse populations, rural areas, gather once a year for 4 or 5 days to reunite themselves and rekindle themselves spiritually.
Give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, it's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, it's good enough for me.
It's a quaint event that's been happening for centuries in South Carolina. The concept's been around much longer. We know it here in the South as camp meeting, but its origin is from early Bible times, with celebrations known as the Festival of Booths, the Festival of the Ingathering, or the Festival of the Tabernacle. Camp meeting is fall's first true Thanksgiving observance. It's a time for worship, praise, fellowship, and a lot of good food. It's as much a part of Southern culture and heritage as sweet tea or cornbread, or dinner on the grounds on Sunday homecomings.
Good enough for me.
Here in Dorchester County, South Carolina, in the fork of Interstates 95 and 26, is the Indian Field Campground, one of the largest in the state, with 10 acres that are inhabited just 8 days of the year. The Indian Field Camp Meeting began in the late 1700s as Methodism was introduced to the colonies.
Time was set during the fall of the year when farmers had finished up their crops and a little money had come in, and they had time before the next year started to have camp meeting, and the circuit riders scheduled their time to accommodate this sort of schedule.
For Mr. George Knight and his family, camp meeting tradition goes back for generations. George has been an officer on the Camp Meeting Board of Trustees for years, just like his father and his father before him. In fact, George has attended a week-long camp meeting with his family for 74 years. All told, that's more than a year and a half of life. Back in the days before radio and television, the internet, or newspapers, camp meetings served multiple purposes, mostly spiritual revival, with a good bit of family reunion and fellowship thrown into the mix.
It's a great place just for fellowship, seeing people that you haven't seen since last year, conversation, joking, just being with one another. And of course we enjoy good food and the spiritual aspect of it.
The campground has a unique layout. There are 99 simple wood frame cabins, called tents, in a big open circle facing inward towards the camp's focal point, the tabernacle, where 3 church services are held each day of camp meeting. A 7 a.m. prayer meeting, an 11 a.m. worship service, and another service at 8 p.m. Each of the cabins or tents is very similar in design, built with unfinished weathering board, a front porch with a couple of benches for gathering, and up to 4 bedrooms to accommodate larger families. There's no indoor plumbing, and the floors are bare ground covered with straw for the duration of each camp meeting. In back of each tent, on the outside of the circle, is another porch, under which is found wood stoves and simple kitchen appliances for fixing meals. 3 full meals a day means staples like fried chicken, garden fresh vegetables, and delicious desserts. In times gone by, families, mostly farm families, came to the campground in covered wagons and brought with them livestock to be slaughtered and cooked during the week. Back then, before the tents were built, the men slept under the wagons, while the ladies and children slept inside under cover away from the elements. Families are called for worship by the sounding of a long, antique, handmade copper horn, which echoes through the campground. As night falls, the smoke and satiating aroma from wood stoves stoked from supper wafts across the campground. Small bonfires light the darkness and serve as a magnet to attract families and friends. There's limited electricity in each tent, primarily for a light bulb or two and a few basic electrical kitchen appliances. But don't expect to see TVs or hear boom boxes in the campground. Those items are forbidden.
The campground was lit at night by what we call fire stands. These were 4 posts put in the ground, formed square about 8 by 8. Dirt was thrown on top of the boards, and then they built up fire on top of those stands. And they had a caretaker or someone. Wood was always piled by them before camp meeting to walk around the campground and continue to throw wood on it to keep it lit. Underneath the tabernacle, kerosene lamps, and within the tents, kerosene lamps provided the light.
There have been surprisingly few tragedies associated with the Indian Field Campground, surprising because of the thousands of people that gathered in such primitive ways for 8 straight days. One tragedy, though, proved to be fatal.
During the war between the states, people from Charleston came up to the campground when gunboats began to bombard Charleston, some 500 of them. And while they were here, a smallpox epidemic broke out. Several died and are buried back on the property here at the campground.
The campground was the target of vandals 10 or 15 years ago when they torched and destroyed 10 of the cabins. As much as necessary goes into the upkeep of the campground throughout the year. Mr. George and his son rebuilt the tabernacle pews a few years back, and a group helped to restore the aging tabernacle gable-hipped roof, supported by exposed rafters, beams, and square wooden posts, many of which are from the original construction. Indian Field does have a rich history. In 1973, the campground was listed on the National Register of Historic Places inventory. In 1810, Francis Asbury, the leader of the American Methodism, preached at Indian Field. And the campground is tied to another historic event, the composition of the tune we now know as the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
And it is believed that the Battle Hymn of the Republic was first written at this very campground.
The words we associate with the song today were written much later, but the tune grew out of South Carolina camp meetings, with its origins said to have been right here at Indian Field. Regardless of the reason you attend camp meeting, whether for worship, family, friends, or food, one thing is certain: there will be a revival.
Somewhat a mountaintop experience in your faith or in your religion. I experienced, and many others have here at this camp meeting. More of what I sort of expect heaven to be like in the real world. A place where everybody seems to be happy, full of conversation, and just the good things that you enjoy.
Cross over into campground.
There's nothing fresher, nothing finer than locally grown fruits and vegetables. They're tastier, sweeter, healthier, and most of us would agree they're better. That's why your South Carolina Department of Agriculture is working to make certified South Carolina-grown produce and products available in stores in your neighborhood. Ask for South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Stay tuned. When we come back, we'll go to the kitchen and cook up some recipes just in time for the new year.
Hi, I'm Hugh Weathers, your South Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. Did you realize that agriculture is South Carolina's second largest industry? Our state has a long history of agriculture production and is also known for the flavor and quality of our many fruits and vegetables, from horticulture to meat, poultry, and specialty crops. Agriculture is a multi-billion-dollar industry in our state. Remember to support local agriculture when you shop. Ask for certified South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Welcome back to our Carolina cooking segment. Today, as you can see, we're in the great outdoors. You know, it's late fall or early winter time, and a lot of people may not consider getting the grill out and scrubbing it off and pulling some good homegrown meat on the grill. Well, today we're going to do that. We're going to bring some pork chops out in just a minute, and all the fixings that you might want to consider during this holiday time. When it's cool outside or cold where you may be, some good soul food that'll warm up your heart and warm up your soul and stomach as well. We're here today with Jim Griffin. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Reggie.
Jim is our National Legislative Coordinator for the South Carolina Farm Bureau Federation. He represents our farmers and all of our members through his relationships with the folks in Washington, D.C., as well as around South Carolina, and helps keep farmers in business by making sure laws are passed that are friendly to farmers and landowners and whatnot. So thank you for all you do in that regard. Jim, tell us what you got for us today.
Well, we're going to have some pork chops on the grill in a little bit, but right now we're cooking up some okra rice, and we've got collards in the pot over here, and we've got some black-eyed peas over here.
All right.
So we're going to finish up the okra rice. We've sautéed some onions and okra in that big old pot, and some rice, and we're going to dump in some tomatoes and some bacon.
All right.
And we're going to stir it all together.
First?
I'll put the tomatoes in there.
All right.
And I'll stir this.
Now, it's true that all these ingredients are South Carolina grown.
Absolutely.
All of them in there?
All of them's good. Except for the rice. We do grow some rice in South Carolina, but this is not some of ours.
Okay.
But everything else is South Carolina grown.
And that's a big campaign that we're running in South Carolina now that Farm Bureau helps support and help get the money for through our legislature.
And put some of that bacon in there too, please, sir. Right on top. That's great.
Oh, that's a beautiful looking dish too.
We also serve this in the South, this kind of dish around New Year's, where we'll have the greens supposedly bring you lots of dollars.
Okay.
And the peas bring you lots of coins. And the pork brings you lots of good eating. So that's the tradition.
You know, one of the reasons that we got Jim involved with this segment especially, I've been fortunate enough to be on some of our legislative events where Jim's brought the grill out and has cooked and has gotten pork chops. And in a minute you'll see just how thick those pork chops are. I have never been able to cut into a pork chop with a plastic fork and knife and just slice right through it, so tender and so nice. So tell us a little bit about, before we go to the grill, a little preparation time involved with the pork chops.
We brine the pork chops. We brine the pork chops with a gallon of water and a cup of salt, a little bit of sugar, and some garlic, and whatever else you want to put in there, bay leaves, peppercorns, whatever, and you put that on with about an inch or inch and a half pork chop for 6 or 8 hours, and it really keeps the moisture in and makes it nice again.
Could you do it the night before you were planning on cooking?
You could. You'd need to make your brine a little weaker.
Okay.
But that's easy to do.
Yeah, and that brine then breaks the meat down and
it doesn't break it down so much. It just keeps the moisture in and keeps it nice and moist when you grill them. Center cut pork chops can get dry if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to cook them kind of quick. And we're going to bring them up to about 145 degrees and then let them rest a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. Well, tell us about your black-eyed peas and your collards.
Collards are locally grown, and they are. We always put our collards in some water and boil them just 5 or 6 minutes. We call that blanching, blanching or parboil them just a little bit, maybe 5 minutes. Pour that water off. And then all that's in there is just a little bit of ham, some beef broth, and some seasoning and just a touch of butter.
And your beans, did you start with dried beans?
Started with dried black-eyed peas, and all that's in there is a little bit of onion and bell pepper.
Okay.
And
I see you used a little red and green bell pepper to give it a little color.
Right, and that's all that's in there, and a little seasoning. That's
Good
it.
deal. Good deal. Tradition at your house growing up for New Year's?
About the same thing we have here. A lot of times my mom would not grill pork. She would cook it in the oven.
Mm-hmm.
But we would still have the same. We'd have rice and red rice and black-eyed peas and collards. And we also would have hog jowl sometimes, which is kind of like country bacon kind of.
Yeah.
But that was a tradition, too. I don't know where that came from. But
Okay.
we're not having that today.
Well, you make a good point, too, about Mama cooking that pork in the oven. Just because we're here in beautiful South Carolina where the weather's not far from this during the fall and winter months of the year, by the time people are viewing this, it very well could be feet of snow on the ground in some places of the country. So all this stuff really could be done in the kitchen. You don't have to. This isn't all grill food. You could easily take it in the house. And pork chops would do just as well in the oven. May have to tend to them a little bit. But,
or do a whole loin and cook it slow.
Very good.
That'd be great.
All right.
It'd work great.
Well, that's great. Well, let's take a break, and we'll go around to the grill in just a minute and put those pork chops on.
There's nothing fresher, nothing finer than locally grown fruits and vegetables. They're tastier, sweeter, healthier, and most of us would agree they're better. That's why your South Carolina Department of Agriculture is working to make certified South Carolina-grown produce and products available in stores in your neighborhood. Ask for South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
We're putting some oil on the chops.
What kind of oil you got?
This is canola.
Okay.
And then
Is
we're
there
going
a preference?
I don't think it canola, or I usually use canola or olive oil.
Okay.
And I'm going to put some oil on there. Not
now,
a whole lot.
when you went to a regular grocery store,
right?
Talked to the meat manager,
right?
And what did you ask for to get these? You never see these kind of pork chops in the meat case.
You sort of have to ask for an extra thick cut center pork chop. And you want it to be sort of like a T-bone steak. You want the tenderloin over here, and then the what would have been in a steak, tenderloin, and the New York strip. So you got two. This is very tender, and this is not quite as.
Right.
And that's what you ask for. And sometimes they do it right, and sometimes they don't. You have to really insist that they give you what you want. We've got a fellow down in Charleston that makes this rub. It's called Buster's Rub, and it's my very favorite. It does good on these pork chops.
What kinds of things are in there?
Some garlic and pepper and paprika and different seasonings.
Oh.
And we'll turn these over and going to do them on the other side.
Man.
And then we're going to cook them kind of hot and quick.
Yeah.
And we want to get them to about.
Same thing on these?
Yes, sir, please. We want to get them to about 145 degrees. I got a thermometer over there. We'll check.
No, that's important, especially with pork, isn't it?
Well, we have really safe pork in America, but you still want to cook it pretty done. And we'll cook it about 145, which would be considered kind of rare for pork. But then you let it sit. That's the key. If you cook it too done in the beginning, it'll dry out. So you want to cook it and let it sit a little bit.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. All right.
Nice size grill. Now, what did you do to prepare your grill, Jim?
We need to clean it a little bit and oil it up and get our charcoal going. We want a good hot fire. And then we'll use a two-stage fire. As you can see, there's a hot spot in the middle where the fire is, and then once they brown good, we're going to move them over to a place that's not quite as hot and let them rest a little bit. A lot of times I'll start with a regular charcoal or regular briquette, but when you get ready to add, if you needed to add charcoal, I use a cowboy or natural charcoal to throw in there because it has no binders or anything. It's all natural, and you put it in there and you get no off flavors, and it burns really hot. It's more expensive, so I don't use it all the time.
Do you put a type of wood in there as well?
If I'm smoking, I do. I'll put hickory or pecan or wild cherry or some of each, and we could put some in here. But when we cook them as fast as these cook, I don't worry too much about it. But if we were doing a whole loin or a chicken, we cooked it real slow. We would do it like that. So we're going to close it up, and we'll let it cook a little bit, and then we'll flip it.
All right, we'll check back in just a minute.
Hi, I'm Hugh Weathers, your South Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. Did you realize that agriculture is South Carolina's second largest industry? Our state has a long history of agriculture production and is also known for the flavor and quality of our many fruits and vegetables, from horticulture to meat, poultry, and specialty crops. Agriculture is a multi-billion-dollar industry in our state. Remember to support local agriculture when you shop. Ask for certified South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Well, there you have it, cooking out late fall, early winter here in South Carolina. We hope that you've enjoyed this cooking segment. Jim, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us. And wherever you are in the United States, look for locally grown food, especially here in South Carolina. It's delicious. I know you'll enjoy it. That's our segment. We'll see you in just a moment.
There's nothing fresher, nothing finer than locally grown fruits and vegetables. They're tastier, sweeter, healthier, and most of us would agree they're better. That's why your South Carolina Department of Agriculture is working to make certified South Carolina grown produce and products available in stores in your neighborhood. Ask for South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Our Palmetto portrait today comes from the pages of South Carolina Farmer, the award-winning magazine of the South Carolina Farm Bureau Federation, the 2009 winter edition, where we feature pictures of churches from across South Carolina. Here now is our Palmetto portrait. Well, our time's about out for this installment of Voices of Agriculture, South Carolina Farm Bureau edition. Thanks for watching. For information on any of the stories that you saw during this half hour, we invite you to log on to scfb.org. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Reggie Hall.